Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Mrinmoy Pramanik. I teach comparative Indian language and literature at the University of Calcutta. Today we will discuss on the historiography of translation or translation and historiography. This is a module from Literary Translation in India paper, and the content of this module is written by me. The idea of a historiography of translation was so new that they had not yet had time to construct theoretical frameworks of their own. The comment made by Leah Weller. Each tradition and culture can be better understood with the historical study. Fredric Jameson's call for always historicizing, indeed slogan for the newly emerged academic discipline or newly discovered tradition and heritage of practice. Harry Levy, an American comparatist, once regretted the fact of academic practice of literature that it focuses more on literary theory than the literary history. It is not only the reality of literature in general, but it is indeed a reality in comparative literature more specifically. Translation studies as an academic discipline is only a few decades old, an infant academic approach in comparison to other established disciplines. But translation is most ancient human practice. In the academic discipline or even in the research in translation studies, pay too less attention or hardly pay any attention to the history of translation. The research and academic practice is more about theorizing the translation practice, understanding the tradition, translation tradition, norms, culture, language issues, and so on. As translation does not emerge like original literature in a particular culture, it needs historiography to have adequate understanding of know-how of translation. Because translation is always about plantation of a text from one culture to another culture. If anyone attempts history of translation in particular language, first problem she faces is with the historiography. The foremost problem of writing a history is about its methodology. As history of translation and historiography of it has not yet been much practiced, historiographers or historians find problem to propose or to adapt a discursive framework. However, translation emerges always in very specific context. It involves history, politics and cultures, national and international issues, and so on. Different kinds of text are translated in a particular time. Historians do not know always how to accommodate such varieties of text have been translated into a particular language. Moreover, each translator has their own ideology, norms, and culture to choose a text, to translate a text. History of translation also has to have a deep study on the language used in translated text. Theme, chronology, language, author, none of the paradigms are sufficient to read the translation history, as it involves multiple types of text from different languages within or beyond national boundary. Now, let us talk about the definition of historiography. What is historiography? According to Fury and Salaviers in their 1988 work, according to their understanding, historiography is the study of the way history has been and is written, the history of historical writing. When you study historiography, you do not study the events of the past directly, but the changing interpretation of those events in the works of individual historians. Then what is literary historiography? The definition, what I quoted is about the definition of historiography. Now let us talk about literary historiography. Before going into historiography of translation, we need to have a clear understanding of target literature and target literary polysystem. Target culture, target language, and the polysystem of target literature instructs the source language, type of text, etc. to be translated. So literary history of target culture helps to have a better understanding of the ground where translation has been planted. Marco Zuvan defines literary historiography in this way. Literary historiography is a kind of discourse, or more precisely, a subset of historical discourse. And second, that literary history as a text sort is its most prominent genre. Both points are meant to stress that literary historiography, like any other scholarly discipline, has its own history, and that both its emergence and development have been strongly influenced by socio-cultural context in which and for which it has been produced. Literary historiography is a discourse because its knowledge is subject and context dependent. What is and can be known in historiography is produced intertextually through a chain of propositions and utterances, as well as constituted by disciplinary practices of agencies and institutions within a special field of social interaction. From this definition of literary historiography, or from this understanding notion of literary historiography, we can understand that why Kambal's Ramayana will be translated in a certain period, or in medieval Indian literature why Ramayana and Mahabharata will be translated, why Bible will be translated in a particular time, with the colonial modernity, with the civilizing mission, with the expansion of Christianity in India. Because this history of translating Ramayana and Mahabharata in Indian Bhasha, or the translation of Bible in different Indian languages, or translation of European literature in different Indian languages, need to have an intertextual and interdisciplinary study to understand this history of translation. Because such kind of works of translation never can be happened in isolation. So and so texts have been translated because the situation demands, situation permits, or situation needs the translation. And this is how history of translation works. The previous quotation by Zuvan was more specifically about the historiography of literature or literary historiography. And this literary historiography simultaneously helps us to understand the situation, the position of translated text in particular literary culture. Now, let us talk why do we need historiography? Mr. Burns states his purpose as follows: to characterize the intellectual background of each major period of human advance in Western civilization, show how the historical literature of each period has been related to its parent culture, point out the dominant traits of the historical writing in each era, indicate the advance, if any, in historical science, and then make clear the individual contributions of the major historical rights of the age. In the past 2 decades, the study of translation in history has been transformed. Where it was once a metaphor for new strategies of intellectual history, it is now an object of sophisticated epistemological inquiry. Under the tutelage of linguistic and literary theory, moreover, we now understand translation in a manner quite differently from 2 decades ago. Translation is no longer a simple transfer of words or text from one language to another on the model of the bilingual dictionary or the bridging of language differences between people. Rather than a straightforward operation performed on words, translation has become a translingual act of transcoding cultural material, a complex act of communication. In the process, translation has come to engage the fact of deep and problematic relationship among forms of writing, idiomatic uses of language, variants of register that alert one to markers of class and gender and structure of thought that begin to give cultures their distinctive outlook. Hence, the outcome of these relationships is not necessarily a common idiom, but a series of negotiations involving untranslatability, incommensurability, and the risk of unbridgeable gaps between peoples and culture, commented by Douglas Howland. Now, translation also has a need to be understood with a historic point of view. A translated text does not exist in isolation, as I mentioned earlier. There are whole lots of issues related with translation. Some of those are very prominent and some of those are very silent. We have observed paradigm shifts in translation when translation theory focuses on linguistic aspects of translation and then it concentrates on the cultural aspects of translation with the post-colonial reading of a translation system in a particular language or culture. We have studied translation with the approach of polysystem theory and descriptive translation studies or the descriptive translation theories. All these different aspects bring us towards new interpretation and new reading of translation system which was not discovered before. Such developments in translation studies show that translation is no more a textual study only. It is not only about equivalence or good or bad moral questions, or we are not confined only within the question of gains, and we are not confined only within the question of gains or loss in translation. But we understood translation as a reflection of greater demand, cause, and means of a linguistic or cultural community. History of translation, therefore, addresses all these questions to understand the why of translation, impacts of translation in a target culture, taste of knowledge and intellectual desire of a particular society. It helps us to know the power, the culture, the aesthetics and the politics which are involved with the work of translation. If we would like to write the history of modern translation practice in India, we will understand how translation was used to rule Indians by the British, how British were eager to propose models of translation. For example, William Carey translated Ramayana into Bengali from Calcutta, whereas the Bengali Ramayana translated by Krittivasa was so popular, so deeply rooted in the Bengali culture and so circulated among the people. But Carey did it to propose a standard model of translation. This is how the power game works. How British wanted to discover the Eastern lands with translating Eastern knowledge in European languages. All these things are reflected in the translation practice by British or by the Europeans. Our existing knowledge in translation already talks about all these issues. We need a historiography to understand the inherited, already existed connections through which each text is particularly connected or disconnected in modern Indian translation. The history of modern Indian translation also helps us to understand how the Indian provinces were imagined by the British or other imperial forces. The historiography of translation does not limit itself within the study of translated text and its greater impact on the society only. nor even only the study the why of translation, but it includes theoretical study of translation too. It tries to propose theory if there is no available theory emerged from the so translation practice. Where there is established theoretical ground, there it historicizes the development of translation theory and its existing relation with the translation practice, and also even assumes the future of the theory in the context of translation practice. Historiography of translation theory we need because we need historiography. Theory and historiography both are very much interwoven. With the historiography of translation, we can understand the tradition of translation and certain changes in translation. Why in 19th century translation of Indian literature by the British was so well circulated, so popular, and why the paradigm shift happened, why the translation by the British or European declined and a new English educated Indian intellectual class emerged as the translators. We need to understand these facts and history approaches towards these questions, that how colonial rule and expansion of European education prepared a field for the native Indians to be educated with European and English education and to replace the previous British or European scholars who were taking our upper hand or who were defining the process, the method of translation of Indian literature into European languages, and who were appreciating ancient or medieval Indian literature with an authority. So such kind of paradigm shifts have been addressed by the translation history or are being supposed to be addressed by the translation history. So translation history observes the translation culture with interwoven links, and it finds that why of translation. It finds that why changes happen in translation. So it reads the translated text with greater context of socio-cultural, political and economic realities. Now let us talk about historiography and Indian translation. K. Sachidanandan, a renowned scholar and poet of Indian literature, comments, the role of translation can hardly be overemphasized in a multilingual country like India with 22 languages recognized in the 8th schedule of the Constitution. 15 different scripts, hundreds of mother tongues and thousands of dialects. One can very well say that India's is a translating consciousness, and the very circumstances of their real existence and the condition of their everyday communication have turned Indians bilingual, if not multilingual. One can even add without exaggeration that India would not have been a nation without translation, and we keep translating almost unconsciously from our mother tongue when we converse with people who use a language different from ours. He further says, our first writers too are translators. Indian literature is founded on the free translations and adaptations of epics like Ramayana and the Mahabharata. Up to the 19th century, our literature consisted only of translations, adaptations, interpretations, and retellings. Translations of literary works as well as knowledge text, discourses on medicine, astronomy, metallurgy, travel, shipbuilding, architecture, philosophy, religion, and poetics from Sanskrit, Pali, and Prakrit, Persian, and Arabic have kept our culture vibrant and enriched our awareness of the world for long. Most of our ancient writers were multilingual. Kalidas's Shakuntala has Sanskrit and Prakrit. Poets like Vidyapati, Kabir, Mirabai, Guru Nanak, Namdev, and others each composed their songs and poems in more than one language. Unquote. For example, we can talk about Marathi saint poet Tukaram. His Avong is actually in an instance of an example of multilingual text. He took birth in Maratha and he started traveling through Maharashtra to Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, and he died in Punjab. So he traveled through different linguistic zones of India and he composed his songs, and naturally his songs appeared as multilingual text. So from this example, we can observe, we can understand that each text, there are so many kinds of text produced in Indian literature, and Avongs or Kalidas's plays are such kind of text what needs an approach of translation to have better reading of the text, to have a reading of context of the text. We need translation approach. This very nature of Indian literature and the multilingual skill of Indian authors of ancient and medieval period always used to speak with different languages and texts. There were simultaneous dialogues between languages. This practice with our history inherits needs to be historicized, not only to have better understanding of Indian translation but also to have better understanding of Indian literature. As Sachidanandan rightly points out that our early authors were translators, and Indian Bhasha literature for a long time only was enriched by the translation, recreation and adaptation. The history of Bhasha is necessarily the history of translation. In the beginning of Bhasha literature, translation was not literary other. Translation was the literature, and literature was translation in many ways. If we see the history of Bhasha literature of medieval India, we can find that we had not only the literary translations, but we had performative translation, we have artistic translation of literary text too. So translation was so integral, so integrally rooted in the Bhasha culture. Not only that, if we see the time of colonial modernity, when with the European encounter, Indian literature was experiencing new genres, new themes and writing styles every day. When prose was emerging in Indian languages, can be better understood. All these situations can be better understood not only with the history of Indian Bhasha literature, but mainly with the historicization of Indian translation. Because when we are adapting an European genre of lyric poetry or short story or novel, we are actually translating the genre. So we need to have a translation history to understand the context from which this generic translation actually emerged. In the last year, Indian Institute of Advanced Study, Shimla, in 2015, organized a conference on the historiography of Indian translation. The call for paper, what they released, they tried to give possible hint of sources. What are the source of history of translation, or what can be the source of writing history of translation? As there is no framework of historiography of translation in Indian context, more specifically, nor even any of Indian Bhasha worked on it, Indian Institute of Advanced Studies, Shimla, go a step ahead to it. Before the conference proposed the theme, I, in my PhD dissertation, tried to find a framework of writing translation history in the context of Bengali translation. Indian Institute of Advanced Studies Shimla, in their call for papers, they say, apart from the translated text in all Indian languages, the focus would be prefaces, introductions, forewords, footnotes, glossaries, or postscripts written by translators, editors, authors, or anthologists, and thereby construct and infer views and theories pertaining to translation. It is expected that historiography of translational practices and models used in different languages will present divergent trajectories of translation practices and theorization of translation, and in the process enrich our existing understanding of translation in India. If we go with the statement made in the call for papers of IIS conference, we can find what I did in my PhD work also. What we can find that as Indian translators did not have any conscious effort to theorize the translation, we can find their understanding concepts or notions of translation from the prefaces, from the different notes made by translators or editors or by the publishers. And this is how we can build our own theory of translation, and we can find a framework of writing history of Indian translation. So each text is important for historicizing the translation in India, or theorizing the translation history or the process of translation in Indian context. In our history of Indian literature, we find translation in different periods of history as translation as resistance, translation as power, translation and caste, translation and patronization, translation and colonialism and imperialism, translation and nationalism, translation and nation, etc. All these things to be theorized not only in Indian literature as a whole, but in each Bhasha literature. Translation itself is a historiography, and it helps not only the scholars of translation studies but also the scholars of literary studies, as I hinted earlier. But translation is one of the most powerful tools to the historians in general. The history of colonialism, imperialism in India, and the approaches and practices like Orientalism can be adequately understood if the historians consider translation as tool for writing history. Translation reflects social psyche, cultural mind, political understanding, literary taste, aesthetic sense of the target literary or cultural system, and in that very moment it grasps the key of writing cultural history of a community. K. Sachidanandan further comments that translation has helped knit India together as a nation throughout her history. Ideas and concepts like Indian literature, Indian culture, Indian philosophy, and Indian knowledge systems would have been impossible in the absence of translations with their natural integration mission. If we see the history of medieval translation in India, we can find that Ramayana and Mahabharata as common denominator text to find the nature of Indian literature, and those texts were translated into several Indian Bhasha literature. If we find the history of Bhakti movement, we can understand that similar kind of literary emergence through translation in Bhakti movement actually emerged in different Indian Bhasha literature. If we would like to see the history of translation in India, we can trace the history of growth and development of modern Indian languages too. And this is how the translation, the history of translation is not only restricted in the history of translation only, but it involves history of literature, it involves the cultural history of the community, and it involves the history of languages too. If we see the anti-colonial movement, if we see the nationalist movement, or if we see the project of imagining nation after independence, we can find how much significant role has been played by translation. Through the establishment of Sahitya Academy and National Book Trust, we tried to imagine the nation with the translation of different Indian national literatures. And this is how translation played a role of integrity, not only during the independence or after the independence, but before the independence and even before in pre-colonial era. Now, it is very difficult or quite impossible to relate the history of translation chronologically or to situate the work of translations as total history. Many translated texts do not follow any trend of translation of a particular era. Therefore, it is difficult to fit those texts chronologically. The best option was to create a broader spectrum to situate the translated text and study the trends of translating. Thematic history of translation offered a feasible way to organize a history of translation, as many texts may be taken to come under some general groupings of themes. What other alternative could be there? Perhaps there lies the importance of the archive while researching the history of translation. The lack of archive adds to our collective cultural ignorance about the history of text, not just translated text. This is an obstacle towards conceiving any sort of historiography. Even after completing my arguments, I still wonder if history of translation possible at all. If each text has its individual history, then each text demands its own position to be visible in the history. Then the history of translation would comprise multiple small voices. Would this multiplicity of small voices lead towards any conclusive or even adequate understanding of any literary network? Whether a conclusion is needed or not, at least some destination to understand translation as a discourse and discipline is required. So, to return to the earlier question, what could be another approach for writing such a history? It would have been a history of translators. But could this instantiate any kind of development, or how each is related with another in terms of practice? Here it is important to discuss the difference between the history of single literature and the history of translation. History of translation has to be accepted as the history of multiple literatures, cultures and traditions. Not only because that some texts have been translated from different languages or cultures or from the nations, but also for the concerned history of the text to be selected and translated. So, in the history of translation, there is multiple single history of literatures. There is multiple single histories of the text, and there is multiple history of contacts. This history of translation also shows how translation has been theorized by different creative writers of different bhasha literature through their translation practices to decolonize their own culture and mind and to set up a new bhasha culture or bhasha identity and new language expression. In comparatist view, such kind of work is eccentricity, is very much eccentric, which is perpetual moving away from the any kind of centrality, as Tutun Mukherjee theorized. And this is comparatist subject of study, that the history of translation is always about eccentricity. Thank you.